It is truly a delight for me to present the Paul B. Beeson Peace Award, WPSR's premier Peace Award each year, to another Ground Zero person, Glen Milner. Glen's a longtime member of both Ground Zero and the Lake Forest Park Neighbors for Peace. I think basically has been a founding, sustaining member of both of those organizations. And he has imagined, organized, and led some of the most creative and effective peace activities that we've seen here in the Pacific Northwest. And he's done it so quietly you might even not know who he is. In the 1980s, Glen got curious about the Navy's denial about explosives traveling on inbound trains to the Bangor subbase. The trains had high explosives noted on the side, but the Navy denied that that's what was in the trains. And so he went to his first Freedom of Information Act inquiry and discovered that indeed the trains were carrying highly explosive fueled stages for the Trident 3-stage missiles that would deliver Trident nuclear warheads anywhere in the world. As other questions about government activity arose, Glen was there with Freedom of Information Act inquiries to determine the contents of trucks going in and out of the Navy base. After we blocked the trains, they started moving the missile motors and the warheads by truck. And Glen was the one to try to get the information, accurate information, that we were not otherwise able to get. This eventuated into a Freedom of Information Act request for information from the Navy at their Indian Island nuclear weapons storage facility just off of Port Townsend. And the Navy, again, refused the Freedom of Information Act, and Glen, with amazing attorney help from Mickey Gendler and Dave Mann, took this through the Ninth Circuit to the United States Supreme Court, and Milner v. Navy is a victory in that the Supreme Court voted, I think it was 8-1, am I right, in favor that the Navy had essentially violated the terms of the Freedom of Information Act, and that has now been remanded back to the Ninth Circuit for further attempts. We still don't have the information. We're still waiting. Glen is also the force behind the now annual Peace Fleet that meets the Navy flotilla that our Seattle Seafair Committee invites into Elliott Bay every year to showcase our naval strength, to recruit for the Navy, and to celebrate the presence in our region of one of the largest military communities in the United States. Glen almost single-handedly fended off the United States Coast Guard when they gave him a $10,000 fine for moving his boats too close to the Navy ships. There's a 500-yard required boundary around the ships. But it turns out that they lied about where he was, and he was able to basically prove that, and he's not been made to pay that fine. Glen's a devoted husband. Yes. Yeah, at Seafair, watch for the kayaks and the boats that have the peace banners out there. That's Glen and his Captain Glen and his crew. Glen's also a devoted husband. Carol is here with him today. Father of a family musical ensemble. These folks are wonderful musicians. And he's one of the most understated activists I've ever known. He's also the one that I would least want to tangle with if it came to determination, perseverance, and articulate presentation of evidence. So it's a great pleasure for me to present Glen and Carol Milner, the WPSR 2011 Paul B. Beeson Peace Award. Glen, Carol, come on up. Carol, come on with him. Carol, come on up. Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility proudly presents our 2011 Paul B. Beeson Peace Award to Glen Milner in recognition of extraordinary service to humankind through his exemplary actions to create a more healthy, peaceful, and sustainable world. July 14th, 2011.
Thank you. I prepared a statement. There's a few things I'd like to say. It's a great honor to be here with Washington PSR and to be here on Dave Hall's night and to receive the Beeson Award. I've long known and respected the work of Physicians for Social Responsibility, and like so many others, in the early 80s, I studied Helen Collicott and heard her speak. Actually, I heard her speak at Shoreline Community College, and where she would look at the audience at the end of her lecture and state, "What are you going to do?" And she would say, "What are you going to do to stop the threat of nuclear weapons?" And like everyone else in the auditorium, I felt she was speaking directly to me. And she was, of course. Helen Collicott inspired others, or educated others, but more than that, she inspired others to work from her, due to her own courage and her own actions. I have to say that I'm actually, and I've mentioned this to a few people here, I'm really not used to this type of recognition. So I'm trying to get used to it. It's better than a lot of attention I've gotten over the years. I also know that there's many others here tonight who deserve this award as much or more than I do. And it's tempting actually to start naming those here who are an inspiration to me, but I won't do that. I would like to say this, though. In our work that we go through, this is something I always wanted to say to Stephen Gilbert, that I really enjoyed talking with him in our jail cell in 2007. And actually, Martin Fleck was there, too. And I was wondering, I prepared this statement, I thought, does anyone remember this? And then I saw Martin just a minute ago, and he said, "There's my cellmate." So, the time we spend together is so important and often enjoyable. One day in jail was enough for me, though. Recently, I've been trying to stop the Navy's proposed second explosive handling wharf at Bangor. And the wharf is 6 1/4 acres of structure over Hood Canal. It will cost $780 million or more, and it's completely unnecessary. We've first tried to stop the test pilot program, which is a connected action to the wharf, and we're working on this through the environmental review, and it involves public statements, environmental statements, and study of NEPA regulations, that type of thing. But recently, when I was working on this, I was looking for scientific studies and opinions that could be used against the second wharf. And I soon discovered that many in the scientific community in this area either work for the federal government or receive grants from the Department of Defense. And many, I'm afraid to say, at the University of Washington have worked directly with the Navy in Hood Canal. And it became clear that it was very, very difficult or nearly impossible to get people in the scientific community to speak against this activity in Hood Canal. So I contacted an old scientist that I have spoken to for over the years, Norm Buskey, and he was an environmental activist in the Northwest. And I knew about Norm first because he once planned to take radiation records out at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, but there was what the Navy had done there was they had put up a sign that said no unauthorized boats in the area. So what Norm decided to do was he just took his equipment and swam into the shipyard. He had a legal process that followed after that, but he came out of it okay, I think. So I spoke to Norm about my frustration and in trying to get scientific opinion on the second wharf. And we spoke for a long time. And then at the end, he said, Norm said to me, he said, you really don't need any experts. He said, you know what's important in this issue. And he said, hang on to what you know and don't give up. You can win. And our conversation was over, of course, at that. And he just explained to me what a lot of us are doing all the time. So I thanked him for that, and it was a good to know. I've been a researcher for years on nuclear weapons and issues involving civil rights for activists, which oftentimes follows soon after you do an action. And environmental issues involving nuclear weapons at Bangor. But I've learned that information in itself is not enough for people to act, that they need to be inspired, and that's our job, to inspire one another to act. And we do that by our determination and by our own actions. Over the years, there's been countless friends with Ground Zero and WPSR that have inspired me to act and continue to this day to inspire me to act. WPSR would be wise to honor Dave Hall and revoke his retirement. And I think Dave knows this, there will be no retirement party for Dave Hall at the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action. And one of the reasons for that is that we can't afford to let Ann Hall go, who we depend on. And we've noticed they travel in pairs. So we need both of them. No one gets out of Ground Zero that easy. And that's the case. And I thank Dave for mentioning Jackie's condition. It is very grave. On a better note, Father Bix is back from Tennessee, and I'm told he's doing very well. Some people are actually surprised at how well he's doing. Lynn Greenwald of Ground Zero is also in prison at SeaTac Detention Center for the Disarm Now Plowshares action in November 2009. She's scheduled for release in September. So anyway, I'd like to thank you again for this award. It's quite an honor. And thank you to WPSR and to Ground Zero. And thanks to all you folks.